Some quirks look flashy but crumble under pressure. Others seem boring until they break the entire game. My Hero Academia's power scaling isn't about who hits hardest. It's about which abilities exploit fundamental weaknesses in reality itself. The framework is simple. The most devastating quirks either stockpile exponentially, manipulate environmental conditions, or rewrite rules of physics and biology. Let's break down exactly how these mechanics work. The stockpiling principle fundamentally breaks My Hero Academia's power ceiling, and both One for All and All for One exploit this mechanism in ways that make them conceptually superior to every other ability in the series. One for All operates on exponential accumulation that defies normal quirk limitations. Each generation doesn't just add their strength, they multiply the total power by their individual contribution. When All Might received One for All, he wasn't getting the combined strength of 7 people. He was getting 7 generations of exponentially compounded power that had been building for decades. This creates a mathematical impossibility for opponents. While normal quirks have fixed ceilings based on the user's biology and training, One for All's ceiling increases with every passing day. Deku at 100% isn't just stronger than All Might, he's accessing power that All Might never could have reached because the stockpile continued growing even after it was passed down. The truly devastating aspect is that One for All doesn't just stockpile physical strength, it accumulates the quirks of every previous user, creating an arsenal that grows more versatile with each generation. Black Whip, Float, Fajin, Danger Sense, Smokescreen. These aren't just bonus abilities, they're tactical options that compound the base power exponentially. But here's where it gets interesting. All for One operates on the opposite principle with identical results. Instead of accumulating power over time, it accumulates power through theft and combination. All for One doesn't just steal quirks, it weaponizes the fundamental rule that governs MHA's world. One person, one ability. All for One breaks this rule completely. While every other character is limited by their single quirk's mechanics, All for One can combine abilities in ways their original users never imagined. Need defense? Combine Hardening with a barrier quirk. Need offense? Layer multiple destruction abilities for devastating combos. Need mobility? Stack speed and flight quirks simultaneously. The tactical flexibility is unlimited, because All for One can adapt to any situation by stealing the perfect counter quirk. Fighting someone with fire? Steal an ice quirk. Facing a speedster? Steal a prediction or time manipulation ability. Every battle becomes a puzzle where All for One has access to every possible solution. This creates the stockpiling paradox. Both quirks achieve godlike power through accumulation, but they represent opposite philosophies. One for All builds power through legacy and sacrifice. Each user gives up their life to strengthen the next generation. All for One builds power through domination and theft, taking what others have developed and combining it for personal gain. The symbiotic relationship between these opposing forces is what makes them both conceptually unstoppable. One for All exists because All for One's theft created the need for a power that couldn't be stolen. All for One continues evolving because One for All represents the one prize it can never fully claim. Both abilities exploit the one person, one ability rule by transcending individual limitations. One for All transcends through generational legacy. All for One transcends through systematic theft. The result is identical, power that operates outside normal quirk mechanics. What makes stockpiling abilities fundamentally different is that they don't just break the power ceiling, they eliminate it entirely. While other quirks reach maximum potential based on user training and biology, stockpiling quirks have no theoretical upper limit. One for All will be stronger next year than it is today. All for One will have more tactical options next month than it has now. This is why both abilities represent existential threats to normal hero society. They don't just overpower opponents, they operate on entirely different mechanical principles that make traditional power scaling irrelevant. Fighting One for All or All for One isn't about matching strength or outsmarting tactics. It's about confronting abilities that rewrite what power means in the first place. The stockpiling paradox proves that in My Hero Academia, the most dangerous abilities aren't those with the biggest explosions. They're the ones that grow stronger while you're trying to figure out how to stop them. From conceptual power accumulation, we move to elemental devastation that reshapes entire battlefields. Elemental quirks don't just deal damage, they rewrite the fundamental conditions of combat combat itself. Explosion and half-cold, half-hot represent the pinnacle of environmental manipulation, creating win conditions that bypass traditional defensive strategies entirely. Explosion operates on a principle of perfect offensive design that makes it nearly impossible to counter effectively. Bakugo doesn't just create explosions, he generates nitroglycerin sweat that detonates on command, creating a renewable resource for devastation that scales with his physical exertion and emotional intensity. The genius of explosion lies in its multifaceted application. Most offensive quirks serve one purpose, but Bakugo weaponized every aspect of his ability. The explosions provide devastating close-range attacks that can shatter concrete and overwhelm opponents instantly. The concussive force creates mobility through explosive propulsion, letting him fly and change direction mid-air with precision that rivals dedicated flight quirks. But here's what makes explosion truly broken: the psychological pressure it creates. Every movement Bakugo makes generates more nitroglycerin. Every second of combat increases his explosive potential. Opponents can't wait him out because time works in his favor. They can't rush him because close-range combat is where explosion dominates. They can't keep distance because his mobility lets him close gaps instantly. The environmental control aspect is where explosion becomes genuinely unfair. Bakugo doesn't just attack opponents, he reshapes entire battlefields through explosive force. Buildings become rubble, terrain becomes craters, cover becomes shrapnel. Within minutes, any combat zone transforms into an environment optimized for explosion's advantages. Todoroki's half-cold, half-hot takes elemental supremacy to an even more sophisticated level through temperature duality that creates tactical options no single element quirk can match. The ability to generate both fire and ice simultaneously doesn't just double his offensive capability, it creates synergistic combinations that multiply his effectiveness exponentially. The temperature regulation mechanism is what makes half-cold, half-hot conceptually superior to other elemental abilities. Endeavor's Hellflame causes cellular damage through overheating. Ice-based quirks cause frostbite through overcooling. Todoroki eliminates both weaknesses by balancing opposing forces, creating theoretically unlimited endurance. But the real breakthrough came with his phosphor technique, which harmonizes fire and ice at the molecular level, instead of treating them as separate abilities. This isn't just using both elements simultaneously, it's fusing them into unified force that exhibits properties of both, while transcending the limitations of either. The phosphor breakthrough enabled Todoroki's ultimate technique, Great Glacial Ager, which generates cold fire that simultaneously burns and freezes targets. This paradoxical combination creates damage that opponents can't adapt to because it operates on contradictory principles. How do you defend against an attack that's both absolute heat and absolute cold? What makes elemental quirks fundamentally overpowered is their ability to bypass defensive strategies through environmental manipulation. Physical defenses become irrelevant when the entire battlefield is on fire or frozen solid. Speed advantages disappear when the ground itself becomes treacherous. Tactical positioning becomes impossible when the terrain constantly changes. The psychological advantage of wielding elemental forces extends beyond simple intimidation. Opponents facing elemental users must constantly adapt to changing environmental conditions, while the elemental user operates in their optimal element. Bakugo fights better in chaos and destruction. Todoroki controls temperature, which affects every biological process his opponents rely on. This creates a compounding advantage, where elemental users don't just deal damage, they force opponents to fight on increasingly unfavorable terms. Every explosion makes the battlefield more chaotic. Every temperature shift makes the environment more hostile. The longer the fight continues, the more the conditions favor the elemental user. The true power of elemental supremacy lies in its adaptability and environmental control. Bakugo's explosions can range from precise surgical strikes to city block devastation. Todoroki can freeze individual opponents or create massive glacial structures. The power output adjusts to match the tactical requirement, while maintaining complete dominance over battlefield conditions. Both quirks demonstrate why elemental abilities dominate combat effectiveness rankings. They don't just overpower opponents through raw force, they systematically eliminate the conditions that allow opponents to fight effectively. Against elemental supremacy, victory isn't about matching power. It's about surviving long enough to find the narrow tactical windows where elemental control can be temporarily overcome. From elemental control that reshapes battlefields, we transition to abilities that rewrite the fundamental rules of reality itself. While elemental quirks reshape battlefields, some abilities operate on even more fundamental levels, rewriting the basic rules of physics and biology that govern reality itself. Devour, Rewind, and Warpgate don't just overpower opponents through superior force. They create existential threats that normal powers simply cannot counter. Shigaraki's Devour represents the evolution from simple destruction to conceptual annihilation. Initially, decay required direct touch to disintegrate matter through molecular breakdown, but Devour transcends physical contact entirely. It operates on understanding rather than proximity. If Shigaraki comprehends how something functions, he can conceptually destroy it regardless of distance or protective barriers. This creates a terrifying escalation pattern where knowledge becomes weaponization. The more Shigaraki learns about an opponent's quirk, biology, or equipment, the more thoroughly he can unmake them. Fighting Devour isn't about avoiding physical contact, it's about preventing comprehension itself. How do you hide the fundamental nature of your existence from someone who destroys through understanding? The true horror of Devour lies in its scope expansion. There's no theoretical limit to what Shigaraki can unmake once he grasps its essential nature. Buildings, quirks, biological processes, even abstract concepts like hope or determination. Everything becomes vulnerable to conceptual annihilation. But Devour's most devastating aspect is its irreversibility. Unlike damage that can be healed or destruction that can be rebuilt, what Devour unmakes ceases to exist on a fundamental level. There's no recovery, no regeneration, no restoration. The target is simply removed from reality as if it never existed in the first place. Ares Rewind operates on equally reality-breaking principles, but through temporal manipulation rather than conceptual destruction. The ability to reverse time on living beings doesn't just heal injuries, it undoes existence itself. Rewind can erase years of growth, training, and development, returning targets to previous states regardless of their current condition. What makes Rewind absolutely broken is its violation of causality. Every other healing quirk works within biological limitations. They accelerate natural recovery or repair specific damage types. Rewind ignores these constraints entirely by making the damage never have occurred. Severed limbs regrow not through regeneration, but through temporal reversal to when they were intact. The strategic implications are staggering. Rewind doesn't just counter damage, it counters time itself. Age, experience, muscle memory, learned techniques, even psychological trauma can be erased by reversing the target to a previous temporal state. Fighting someone with access to Rewind means every advantage you've gained through training or experience can be instantly negated. The ultimate trump card nature of Rewind extends beyond personal combat. Eri could theoretically reverse entire battles, undoing strategic victories and tactical achievements by rewinding key participants to states before they developed crucial abilities. The power to manipulate time on living beings breaks all combat logic because it operates outside the framework of cause and effect. Kurogiri's Warpgate completes this trinity of reality-breaking mechanics by eliminating the concept of distance itself. Space becomes irrelevant when portals can connect any 2 points instantly. Traditional defensive strategies crumble when opponents can appear anywhere without warning or escape to unreachable locations without consequence. The tactical applications of Warpgate create unbeatable positioning advantages. Kurogiri can place allies in optimal attack positions while simultaneously removing them from danger. He can redirect enemy attacks back at their sources or transport environmental hazards directly onto opponents. Distance, elevation, barriers, and terrain become meaningless when space itself can be manipulated. But Warpgate's most broken aspect is its defensive capability. How do you corner someone who can instantly teleport anywhere? How do you protect locations when the enemy can bypass all security through spatial manipulation? Traditional concepts of battlefield control become obsolete when your opponent operates outside spatial limitations. These three abilities represent the evolution of power in My Hero Academia, from physical enhancement to reality manipulation. They don't just break the rules of combat, they rewrite the fundamental principles that make combat possible. Devour eliminates existence through understanding. Rewind eliminates causality through temporal reversal. Warpgate eliminates space through dimensional manipulation. What makes these quirks existentially threatening is their operation on levels that normal powers can't counter. You can't defend against conceptual destruction, temporal reversal, or spatial manipulation using conventional tactics. They create win conditions that exist outside the framework of traditional power scaling. Against reality-breaking mechanics, victory isn't about superior strength or clever strategy. It's about finding ways to prevent these abilities from activating in the first place, because once they're in motion, the fundamental rules that govern combat no longer apply. But not all game-breaking power comes from rewriting physics. Some abilities dominate by simply exploiting a single, unexpected vulnerability. Now, we examine the specialized quirks that become godlike under optimal conditions. The most dangerous opponents aren't always the ones with the flashiest abilities. Sometimes the greatest threats come from quirks that seem limited until their users create optimal conditions where those limitations transform into overwhelming advantages. Dark Shadow, Hardening, and Invisibility represent specialized powers that become godlike when their environmental and psychological triggers align perfectly. Dark Shadow's environmental scaling creates the most dramatic power fluctuation in the entire series. In Daylight, Tokoyami controls a modest shadow creature useful for utility tasks, but complete darkness triggers a transformation so extreme that Dark Shadow becomes an extinction-level threat capable of obliterating seasoned villains instantly. This isn't gradual improvement, it's exponential scaling that defies normal power progression. The difference between Dark Shadow in sunlight versus complete darkness is the difference between a helpful pet and a rampaging kaiju. During the forest training camp, Moonfish, a blade villain who had killed multiple professional heroes, was instantly disintegrated when Dark Shadow achieved Ragnarok state. The beast barely registered the criminal's existence before erasing him from reality. What makes Dark Shadow truly broken is its autonomous consciousness. Unlike normal quirks that users control, Dark Shadow possesses independent will, emotions, and decision-making capability. This creates a partnership dynamic where Tokoyami coordinates with, rather than commands, his ability. In optimal darkness conditions, he's not just using a powerful quirk, he's unleashing a semi-independent monster that thinks, adapts, and escalates beyond his direct control. The psychological warfare aspect amplifies Dark Shadow's effectiveness exponentially. Opponents aren't just fighting Tokoyami, they're fighting a sentient beast that grows stronger through their fear and desperation. The creature feeds on negative emotions while becoming increasingly difficult to contain as environmental conditions favor its growth. This creates a feedback loop where opponent panic directly empowers the threat they're trying to escape. Tokoyami's Black Fallen Angel technique proved that Dark Shadow's specialization extends beyond raw power into tactical supremacy. By wrapping the creature around his body like living armor, he achieved speeds rivaling Hawk's, one of the fastest heroes alive. This transformation eliminated his ground-bound vulnerability while maintaining devastating offensive capability through aerial assault combinations. Hardening demonstrates how deceptive simplicity can become perfect defense through crystalline density and unbreakable psychological commitment. Kirishima's ability appears straightforward. Harden your body to rock-like consistency, but the true power lies in how hardening scales with willpower and becomes literally unbreakable when backed by absolute determination. The Red Riot Unbreakable form showcases specialization pushed to its absolute limit. When facing Rappa's supersonic punch barrage designed for building destruction, Kirishima's hardening didn't just resist, it became impenetrable. Each impact that should have shattered his crystalline form instead strengthened the molecular bonds through accumulated stress resistance. His refusal to yield translated directly into quantifiable defensive increases. What makes hardening genuinely overpowered is its philosophical foundation. The quirk's effectiveness scales with the user's mental commitment to protection. Kirishima transformed from viewing his ability as boring defensive power to understanding it as the wall teammates can rely on absolutely. This psychological shift elevated hardening from simple durability into tactical enablement that lets allies fight at full power without reservation. The crystalline transformation creates offensive applications that opponents consistently underestimate. Hardened fists become sharper through density increase. Charging attacks gain locomotive force through mass and momentum. What appears to be purely defensive capability becomes devastating offense through tactical application and environmental leverage. Invisibility represents the ultimate information warfare quirk that dominates through stealth and light manipulation potential. potential. Toru's permanent invisibility seems like the weakest ability in Class 1A until you analyze its tactical applications and hidden offensive capability. The warp refraction breakthrough proved that invisibility operates on light manipulation principles rather than simple concealment. By accumulating sunlight throughout the day and releasing it as concentrated flash attacks, Toru demonstrated that her support quirk could incapacitate dozens of opponents simultaneously. This revelation suggests her true ability is sophisticated light control, with invisibility as the default state. What makes invisibility genuinely broken is its information-gathering capability. Perfect stealth enables undetectable reconnaissance that provides tactical advantages worth thousands of hero units. Toru discovered Aoyama as the UA traitor through invisible surveillance, intelligence gathering that prevented catastrophic villain victory through strategic preparation. The psychological pressure of fighting invisible opponents creates compound advantages beyond simple concealment. Enemies must constantly guard against attacks from unknown positions, while the invisible fighter observes every defensive pattern and tactical weakness. This information asymmetry transforms every encounter into psychological warfare, where paranoia becomes a weapon. These specialized quirks become overpowered in optimal conditions because they exploit fundamental assumptions about combat effectiveness. Opponents prepare for visible threats, predictable power levels, and conventional tactical applications. Dark Shadow in complete darkness, Hardening backed by unshakable will, and invisibility with perfect information access create win conditions that exist outside normal power scaling frameworks. The tactical value of seemingly limited abilities lies in their unpredictability and environmental optimization. Most fighters develop strategies against common power types, but specialized quirks excel in scenarios where their unique advantages compound exponentially, while opponents struggle to adapt to unfamiliar mechanical principles. The specialists prove that a quirk's effectiveness is all about the conditions, but when you look at all 10 abilities, from One for All to Invisibility, the pattern is clear. Every truly supreme quirk either breaks fundamental rules or exploits environmental advantages to create win conditions. Pattern analysis across these devastating abilities reveals a fundamental truth about power in My Hero Academia. The most dangerous quirks don't just hit harder. They operate on mechanical principles that normal abilities simply cannot counter. The pattern is clear. Every truly supreme quirk either breaks fundamental rules or exploits the key. Key takeaway is that true power comes from understanding and exploiting your quirk's unique mechanics, rather than simply maximizing raw output. The most devastating abilities in My Hero Academia succeed by operating on principles that normal powers can't counter, whether through accumulation, environmental manipulation, reality-breaking effects, or specialized optimization. This analysis proves that apparent limitations often hide the greatest potential. Every quirk has hidden depths, waiting for users who are creative and determined enough to discover them. If you enjoyed this deep dive into quirk mechanics, you'll likely be interested in my video about Midoriya's power progression.